Hey guys, welcome to Showcase Watches. Thanks for logging on and checking out the vid. Before I get into it, like always, check out the rest of the videos, like and subscribe to the channel, leave comments and all the usual stuff. That would be great. Today, wanting to talk about Omega and the relationship Omega and Rolex have and what's going on in the watch industry. Now, a lot of this has been talked about on live streams, a lot of this has been talked about on other watch channels, but I was wanting to do my opinion on the matter and my opinion on what's going on in the industry and what's going on with the different brands. Now, as we know, Omega in the past have been known for releasing limited editions to the point where even the hardcore collectors and the hardcore Omega fanboys like myself are getting a bit sick of it. And Omega seem to have laid off. Omega seems to have stopped doing that. And I think they're taking a league out of Rolex's book. They've seen what Rolex do, they've realised what Rolex are doing, and I think they're doing a bit of it themselves. If we take a look at the last three big releases from Omega, we've got the Omega Seamaster Professional, the No Time to Die, that's the titanium grade 2 titanium, no date, with the tropical dial. It's a beautiful watch. Not one that I will probably own, but it's a beautiful watch all the same. That watch is powered by the caliber 8806, so it's a fantastic movement. It's the same movement that was in my 1957 reissue of the Seamaster Trilogy, so it's a superb, METAS and COSC certified movement. It's a fantastic watch. That watch, everybody, including myself, thought that watch was going to be a limited edition. It wasn't. It's not a limited edition. It's just called the Bond Edition. So anybody can go out and buy it, and it's a great watch to own. It's limited numbers. There isn't that many of them around. It's probably not a watch. You won't find the titanium bracelet version in the AD window, but I have seen a few of the NATO strap versions in the window. But most of the blokes that are buying these watches probably won't buy the NATO watch version, for the simple fact it doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense to buy the bracelet and put the NATO on afterwards. The second watch that they've released is the Omega Speedmaster Snoopy, the blue Snoopy. That watch, again, all the collectors, including myself, wrongly assumed, that watch would be a limited edition. It isn't. Omega have just done it as a Snoopy edition. It is not limited. It's very limited numbers, I would have thought. And I think the demand for that watch will outweigh the supply, certainly in the initial stages. So that watch is very, very hot and very, very desired, and it's already been seen in the marketplace at double retail. So that watch is going, crazy, and it's not limited edition. It is not a limited watch. And the third one is the Omega Speedmaster Ed White, the 40mm Ed White. That's powered by the caliber 321 movement, which, I'm sure you guys know, that watch, that movement is the movement that went to the moon. It was in the pre-moon watches, in the pre-moon Speedmasters, amongst other Omega watches, other Omega chronographs. Fantastic movement, legendary movement, handmade movement. Omega are only releasing roughly about 1,000 of these watches a year. It's not limited edition, but it's certainly a limited production. And again, that watch is super, super desirable, super hot. It's not as hot as the Snoopy. It's not as hot as the Snoopy, but I think once it hits the market properly, I think the hardcore collectors will end up with that watch, because it's a beautiful piece, absolutely beautiful piece. So I think Omega have taken note of what Rolex have done and doing a bit of it themselves. Now, what's been going on with Rolex? Well, as we know, Rolex have released they've released a different line on the OP range. They've released the 41mm in all the different colours, which I think is a really smart move by Rolex. I think what they've done is they've taken the OP range, that's the Oyster Perpetual, which wasn't a particularly desirable model. It was the entry level. It wasn't something that people went mad for. They've taken the entry level, they've taken the boring, bog standard Rolex watch, and they've turned it into a desirable model all of a sudden by doing these different colours. Everybody's going crazy for them. Especially sort of the blues, the greens, the reds. People are going mad for these watches. So, credit to Rolex. It's impressive how they've made the dog of the range into something red hot. So, credit to them. The Submariner line, they've ditched the Hulk. They've gone with what everyone's calling now the Summit or the Starbucks. That's the green bezel with the black dial. They've released the no date, and they've released the date version of the Submariner, and they've released the Bluesy, all in what they're calling a 41mm case. It's actually not. It's a 40.5mm case. 21 millimeters across between the lugs. So they've upped the sizes a little bit, but they have slimmed it down at the lugs. So it's a couple of mil slimmer at the outer edge of the lugs to what the previous model was. So it actually wears a little bit smaller than the 40mm version. So, you know, very, very clever how Rolex have manipulated a few dimensions and made the watch wear smaller than the previous model did. The hype around Rolex is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Well, let's take the current, the newest, the latest model, the 126610LN. That is the date Submariner. That watch currently here in the UK is around about £12,000 to £13,000. It's double retail. Is it worth that amount of money? Absolutely not. It's crazy, absolutely crazy prices. It's not worth that. You will argue it is worth that because people are paying it, but what I'm telling you is when a watch is in current existence, it's a current production model, it is worth the retail price. It is not worth the inflated price. The inflated price is purely inflated by us, the consumer. If everybody had my mentality about this, there would not be a grey market as such. I'm of the opinion that if it's over retail, I don't want to buy it. Unless it's something that I am absolutely mad for having. If it's something I have to have, I will pay over retail. But as a rule of thumb, I try not to. I do my best not to. What's happened is I feel that Rolex are losing their grip a little bit, and I think it's going to continue. I think what Rolex have done, I think we've come to a tipping point now, where Rolex have played their games with the authorised dealers. Actually, I don't think it's Rolex have played the games. I think it's the authorised dealers have played the game. I've always had an issue with Rolex. I love the watches. I don't mind the brand. I hate the ADs. And I'm the first to admit, I've had bad experiences with the ADs, with the Rolex ADs. And I won't walk into a Rolex AD. I just don't like Rolex ADs. I think Rolex watches are superb. Absolutely superb watches. I really do. I think the brand is very, very clever. I think Hans Wilsdorf, the founder of Rolex, I think he set it off on the right foot, and I think it's an amazing brand. And I respect the hell out of it for its marketing and its structure. I really do. The ADs, I cannot stand. I think they're horrendous. As soon as an AD gets Rolex above the door, something changes. They just lose all customer service. They hate them. Omega, on the other hand, you buy an Omega Seamaster Professional. Let's just say the bog standard, the Omega Seamaster Blue, right? That watch is £4,500 here in the UK, whereas the Rolex Submariner's near 7,000, just under 7,000, something like that. The Omega Seamaster Professional, you can buy pre-owned, maybe 6 months old, £3,000, £3,200, somewhere in that bracket, from a £4,500 watch. So you can get, for £3,000, you can buy an absolutely stonking piece from Omega, a beautiful watch. If you look at it watch for watch, the Omega Seamaster, the Rolex Submariner, the Rolex Submariner has the better bracelet and it has the better clasp, arguably. The bracelet 100% on the Rolex is better, but 10 years ago, the bracelet on the Seamaster was far better than the Submariner. The clasp on the Seamaster has the twin deployant, which I personally prefer, but most people would prefer the glide lock system that's in the Submariner. The case and the dimensions of the Seamaster, in my opinion, are better than the Rolex Submariner. The anti-reflective coating on the sapphire crystal of the Omega is better than Rolex. Rolex do a better bezel. a better bezel action, but I find that Omega is a more precise bezel. Omega make the better movement than Rolex do. When you start with all these comparables, all these comparisons between the two watches, there's nothing in them. Between an Omega, between a Rolex, between the Seamaster, between the Submariner, there's very little in them. You're talking about a point or two. If you were to point them, if you were to score points out of 100, the Submariner will probably win it, but by 1 or 2 points, not by a lot. You're looking at spending £12,000 on a watch, the Submariner, versus £3,000 on the Seamaster. Now the people have got this in the head, and they can see the comparison. They're leaning towards Omega. They're going to Omega because they're seeing that it's got better value. You've got a fantastic watch. You've got great service. You've got a great authorized dealer network. You're not having to play the stupid games that you play with Rolex. And I think this is where Omega are picking up Rolex customers. And this is why I think we're at a tipping point. I think we're at a tipping point where Rolex, or the Rolex ADs, have pushed people so far that they've pushed them to Omega. And Rolex is doing this, and Omega's doing this. And you only have to look at the stats. I mean, if you don't believe me, go over to Watchfinder. There's 500 Rolexes for sale. There's 240 odd Omegas for sale. There's half the Omegas for sale as what there are of the Rolexes. And it's because Rolex now has become an investor's brand. It's become a watch that people buy to flip and make money. Whereas the Omega owner, he just buys the watch and loves the hell out of it and just wears the watch and just enjoys being an Omega owner. The Rolex owner, not so much. I mean, yeah, guys, listen, it sounds like I'm having a bashing for Rolex. You can see in the background, Rolex. I mean, granted, if you go a bit further, you can see an Omega. They've got the Speedmaster on the wall. I'm wearing the Rolex. I've got the GMT Batman on, so you can see I'm not against the watches. I love Rolex watches. I think the watches are fantastic. I have an issue with a lot of the people that wear them. I think a lot of Rolex owners have a certain way about them and a certain attitude, which isn't my cup of tea particularly. It's not what I'm into. I find that the vintage Rolex is fantastic. I adore vintage Rolex. If I had the knowledge, I would love to go into vintage Rolex. I think vintage Rolex is such a fantastic genre to go into. It really is. I mean, the vintage Rolexes, back in the day when people were climbing Everest with a 1016 on the wrist, and people going down to the bottom of the sea with a Submariner on the wrist, and the 1950s and 60s when pilots of Pan America Airways were wearing the GMT on the wrist. And you look at all this, and the history of Rolex is absolutely fantastic. The modern history of Rolex is not so much. It's become more about, I see it on the forums all the time, and I see it on Facebook, I see it on all the social media, and I see it on the live streams. People asking all the time, oh, I'm thinking about buying this one or this one. Which is going to go up in value the most? Which one's going to hold its value the best? Which one's going to be the... And they're asking these questions, and they're just, in my opinion, they're the wrong questions to be asking. On the Omega forums, somebody will say, I'm thinking about buying an Omega Seamaster. What shall I go for? Should I go for the blue or the black? I can't decide. That's a fair question. Because it is that's a question that I ask myself. The blue, I'd nearly own both of the watches because I love them both, but I'd nearly buy both of them just to have both, Over on the Omega forums, you tend to find questions like, someone's buying an Omega Speedmaster. Should they buy the Heslite version? Should they buy the Sapphire Sandwich? They've chosen the watch that they want. They've decided on the watch they want. They don't care about its value. They don't care if it's going to go up in value or down in value or what it's going to do. They couldn't care. They're more bothered about the final decision, the colour. Which one should they go for? Should they go for Heslite? Should they go for Sapphire? That's a fair question. That's a fair question. Look on the Rolex side of it. It's about, people aren't asking. You never ever ever see a question of, should I go for a perfect example, should I go for the Rolex Submariner 114060 or the 12460. That's the 40mm version, the previous model that just recently been discontinued, or the newest Submariner. So someone said a question: should I go for one of these two models? I really like the 20. I really like the 20mm difference, but I like this. I like this. I like this, and the movements. And if they were talking about questions like that, I would get it, and that would be a cool question. If somebody says, should I go for the 1140-60 over the 120-40-60 because I think this one's going to hold value better, that's not a cool question. That's what's wrong with Rolex at the moment. That's what's wrong with it. And people are getting pushed towards Omega. And when you look throughout history, you look in the 50s, Omega versus Rolex. Omega were winning. The 60s, Rolex were winning. The 70s, Omega were winning. The 80s, Rolex were winning. The 90s, Omega were winning. 2000s, Rolex were winning. It's Omega's turn again. Omega are going to bounce back, and they're going to take the heavyweight title away from Rolex. That's my opinion, and that's where I think it's happening. And I'm seeing the first signs of it. I'm seeing the unhappy Rolex customers. I'm seeing Omega learning from their mistakes with the limited editions, and they're boxing a bit more clever. Their movements are second to none. The Omega movements are phenomenal. The watch quality, the reissues that they're doing, they're trading on the past. They've got the history and the heritage to trade on. Omega are the brand. They are... A Rolex fanboy will always slag Omega off. And this video, I have no doubt, will be very controversial, and I will get as many dislikes as I get likes. I'm certain of it. That's the way I think it's heading. I think Omega are up and coming, or back up and coming, shall I say, because the two brands have done this all the way along. They've been fighting this battle since the 50s. Omega are up and coming. The Rolex bubble it's not going to burst. It's just losing air. Put it that way. It's not going to last forever. Whereas the Omega bubble is just starting, and we're starting to see the beginnings of it. The Snoopy, the Bond, No Time to Die edition, and the Ed White, all in the same year. That's a pretty impressive three-piece release from Omega. When they start, doing a few bits with the Planet Ocean line and things like that, you see, they can't do too much on the heritage of the Planet Ocean line, because the Planet Ocean's only been around since 2005. So there's not much they can really do with the Planet Ocean. They've not got any heritage in the Planet Ocean. They've got plenty of previous models before that. They've got the Omega Seamaster 2254. Don't be surprised if you don't see Omega do a reissue of that watch. They've got all sorts of cool things coming up, and I'm sure of it. And it's why I will always wave the Omega flag. And I own Rolex, I own Omega. And between the two brands, I prefer Omega. Most of the time when you hear the Rolex fanboys say that they don't like Omega, or they've got a problem with Omega or whatever, or people only own Omega because they can't afford Rolex, or whatever crap they come out with, I own both. And I'm telling you, as someone who owns both watches, I prefer Omega for valid reasons. The build quality of the two watches, very similar. The bezel actions on the two watches goes to Rolex. The case goes to Omega. The lume and dial goes to Omega. The bracelet goes to Rolex. The movement goes to Omega. The clasp, split decision. Personally, I like the twin deployment of the Omega, but and then if you bring packaging into the equation, I think Omega boxes and Omega packaging is far superior to Rolex. So when you get involved at this type of a level, it's an interesting discussion. And when you bring price into the equation, £12,000 versus £3,000, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. So yeah, guys, I haven't done a video like this for a long time. I wanted to do a quick vid, wanted to just, keep in touch with you guys. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think. I would love to know where you think this is going. Personally, Omega is on the up, in my opinion. I think Omega is on the up. Where does this leave brands like Tudor? Interesting one. I think the Tudor is going to step up a notch. It's always going to be behind Rolex. The problem that Tudor is always going to have, it's not Rolex. And that's the problem that Tudor is always going to be up against. I own Tudor. I think Tudor's a beautiful watch. I always think with Tudor, you see Tudor, you think of Rolex, and you can't help that. The watch is its own watch within its own right. You still think of Rolex. When you own it, when you wear it, you still look at it and you still think of Rolex. In some way or form, you still associate it to Rolex. And I think that's its Achilles heel. And it's a shame because it's a bit like Omega. Omega, what bothers me with Omega is that it's owned by Swatch Group. I would much prefer Omega to be owned by, well, I just prefer Omega to be completely independent and on its own, as Rolex is. I think that's far cooler. I like Rolex for the fact that it's on its own. Omega is part of Swatch Group, which is a bigger group. Now, there's disadvantages and advantages to that. Omega, because it's part of Swatch, has access to technologies from all the different brands to pull into different watches, which is a great asset because it means for Omega, this is why Omega can play with the ceramic watches and things like that so much, because they've got the relationships with other watch companies. Whereas Rolex have to do everything in-house. They have to do everything, they own, hence why the 904L stainless steel and things come from. They're making their own stuff. I respect that for Rolex, I really do. I think that's really, really cool that they're doing that their own way. From a consumer's perspective, Omega would be more attractive because they've got access to more tech. There's more technology within the company than within Rolex. So from a consumer's point of view, it's better to have the Omega because you're getting the up-to-date tech. But from a purist point of view, you're probably better off with the Rolex because you're getting the old school in-house. Do you know what I mean? You're getting that. So, I mean, that's an entirely different video. That's we can do another video about that, another day. So let me know what you guys think. Leave me some comments down below. Like and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I would appreciate to know what you guys think. And yeah, I'll see you in the next vid. So take it easy, guys. And this is Showcase Watches. Thanks for watching.